Hey guys, Dark Energy here, bringing you yet another non-meta build, the Lord of the Elements, a triple threat flame, frost, and shock, all three elements in this build, a lot of buffs and debuffs, as well as some very cool visual effects and special effects with each element, constant procs. So we'll take a look at this build. It's primarily for PvP. I do have a variation for PvE that I'll share at the end, but let's take a look at the build and the setup, the gear, and the champion points. Alright, so first let's look at the character stat screen. We'll cast some skills and some buffs here and pop a potion. We've got 37,000 magicka, great recovery, physical and spell resistance, crit resistance, but the spell damage, if you look, is low. That's unattractive on the stat screen, but I'm telling you, you're not lacking any punch with some of these procs and some of the gear, and I'll show you why and how. So all points into magicka. We're a vampire. You want to get those vampire passives. Magicka recovery is the Atronach stone we're using. Primary stats, try food for a little more stamina. We're already good on recovery, so let's look at the gear now. Icy Conjurer is our first set. Lightning Staff, charged. That's on purpose with a shock glyph. I'll get into that in a minute. Max Magicka, spell damage, spell penetration, applying a minor debuff, 28,000 almost frost damage over 8 seconds. You have to apply a minor debuff. That is why I have the charged shock glyph. I'll get into that in a minute. Valken Scoria, a monster set. We're getting a little more extra health, and we're getting that flame proc meteor, which is a direct damage, but also has a little bit of an AoE. It's bursty. An Icy Conjurer robe, Icy Conjurer sash, 5 pieces of that. Our second set, Kalurian's Legacy. Critical damage with the magic ability, fire, ice, shock, or disease. That's perfect for all 3 elements, right? Almost a 15,000 damage orb that gets sent out and applies a status effect guaranteed. Jewelry. If you look, it's all recovery. I could make that spell damage and get my spell damage up, but you're not lacking punch. You want that recovery to keep going and keep going. Now, sword and board, you could do resto or sword and board. I'm using Storm Knight because I didn't have the restoration staff or the sword and board of Icy Conjurer, or you could use a Maelstrom set, but I use Storm Knight for more physical and spell resistance when I'm on my defensive bar. We are a Nord. You don't have to do this. You can be a Breton or a high elf for more magicka damage and whatnot, but I wanted to get, you got more max stamina there, you've got the ultimate regeneration proc there, and you got the physical and spell resistance buff as a Nord, and for PvP those go a long way. Again, you're not lacking power at all, trust me. If you feel like you are, you can go ahead and be a magicka race. Vampirism, I told you we got to have that magicka and stamina recovery by 10%, and then undeath, that additional 33%, up to 33% damage mitigation while below 50% health. And of course, you want to put a point on natural resistance to just kind of help you with that health recovery debuff. So that's the gear. I'll talk about why there is such good set synergy here and why I have certain traits on what and how this all comes together. So the first set we're going to kind of showcase here is Icy Conjurer. You have to apply a minor debuff. It can be minor lifesteal, minor maim, minor vulnerability. We're going to go with minor vulnerability on this charged lightning staff with a shock glyph. It's like 92% of the time you're going to send that ice wraith out, even with a light attack. There, I did a light attack. You see the wraith came out. Now he's damaging. You see the numbers actually changed. The first couple ticks were a little stronger than the last couple because of the minor vulnerability the enemy was affected with, taking more damage from everything, everybody and every source. There it is, a light attack again. You could do a heavy attack. So this wraith is going to come out on command. You don't have to cast a special ability or skill to get it to come out or look to go out of your way to cast a debuff. So another light attack, he just came out again. He can proc Valken Scoria as a damage over time. And what's really cool is it's not just the shock glyph on the charged staff that's giving them minor vulnerability through concussed and off balance. It's the whole entire blockade. As a charged trait, everything you have going out, whether it be the ice AoEs, which are going to give the enemy chilled, which is going to make them have minor maim, reducing all their damage output by 15%. And then off balance and concussion with your blockade is going to cause all of them to have minor vulnerability, taking more damage. Flame is going to cause more burning. You're going to see Valken Scoria a lot of times just ends up lighting them on fire. Alright, so the next set we're going to look at here is Centurion's Legacy. Spell crit, spell damage, spell crit. When you deal critical damage with a single target magicka ability, you launch a fire, ice, shock, or disease ball at your target that deals almost 15,000 damage. That's pretty hefty, and applies a guaranteed status effect. But you have to deal a crit hit with a single target magicka ability. Force Pulse, or Crushing Shock, there it went, is going to deliver Frost, Flame, and Shock all at the same time, in addition to your glyph. As long as one of those crits, which your chances go up dramatically, you're going to send out that, there it is. I actually even sent out the Ice Wraith because of the shock part of Force Pulse, or Crushing Shock. The charge, there's Valken Scoria. Look, now he's burning because of the charged staff. So the charge trait on the staff applies to everything. Now, their Force Pulse, their Centurion's Legacy come out again. That was an Ice Centurion's Legacy. So he got hit with that ball, 15,000 damage, and then got affected with Chilled, which gives him minor maim. Now, you look there, I didn't get a crit hit, but I did get the shock part of Crushing Shock on the enemy, which gave him minor vulnerability, proccing the Wraith. So that's why the Wraith, there's Valken Scoria because of the Wraith. Now he's burning. Actually, Valken Scoria is going to proc itself there. You see that? Okay, there's a Flame one. Crushing Shock just resulted again in Centurion's Legacy. So this is, with one cast of Crushing Shock, you're going to deliver all three elements, typically all three status effects. You're going to likely proc your Wraith, likely proc your Centurion's Legacy, give them minor vulnerability and minor maim all at once. Between that and heavy attacks, the single target damage is just astounding, let alone some of the AoEs you can lay down and layer in your fields here for group play. Alright, so let's take a look at some of these skills now. Ultimate on Staff Bar, Northern Storm. A lot of frost damage, but this one changed pretty big over the last patch. It no longer passively gives you that 9% max magicka or 10% max magicka that it used to give passively constantly. Now, after the cast, you see I had 32,000 magicka, now I have 36. After the cast, you're buffed for 30 seconds, like 12%. Still gives major protection, but that ultimate has changed, and Permafrost actually, as the alternative, no longer stuns. So anyway, Sword and Board Bar, we'll do this one first. Ice Fortress, that's your major resolve and major ward, and gives you minor protection. Blue Betty, that's your spell damage, your major sorcery, and restores magicka over time in addition to what you see in the tooltip. And now is a little better. It will clear 5 negative effects over its course of time every 5 seconds on its own, versus having to recast and take one out and recast and take one out. All right, our first AoE in our ice field, Winter's Revenge. You can cast it at a decent distance. Just a damage over time. A field you want to stand in can proc Valken Scoria. On your staff bar, that's also going to give them a likelier chance, because of the charge trait, to be affected with minor maim, reducing their damage output by 15%. Next skill, Arctic Blast. This one might be one of my new favorite skills. They changed this. It used to be like an awkward targeted heal stun. Now it's an instant heal, a heal over time, an AoE around you that damages with frost in a pretty large area, by the way, and after 3 ticks of the skill will stun the enemy for 4 seconds, much like Permafrost used to do. The heal from that ability scales off max health. So with Valken Scoria, the one piece is actually helping out with that a little bit. So you can see here, bam, there's the 3rd hit. They turn blue and they get frozen. It really is a big area, a 6-meter radius, 12-meter diameter. I think this skill is a little overpowered now as a heal over time, a stun, a damage over time, and the area is pretty big. And you can block cast it here. So as a defensive tool, it's kind of like a table turner skill. I'm a big fan of it. Okay, moving on. Nature's Embrace. This is still one of my favorite heals. It's a gap closer. 14,000 healing over 10 seconds. You're able to instantly get from point A to point B, helping you keep grouped up with your allies. Pretty good range. They fixed it to where now you can no longer go through walls and around corners, which is more realistic, but it sucks because there's times where you send out your vine and then the person rounds the corner and it doesn't give you that latch. So, but it heals you. I picked the morph that heals me and the ally. So another source of healing over time. And sword and board, obviously, so the passives here, the block cost reduction, the amount of damage reduction from projectiles, movement speed, all of that. You want to go with all the passives there. And then you've got the healing ultimate, which I don't have filled right now, so we'll skip it for now and go to the staff bar so I can show that. But okay, Dampen Magic. This is the morph that gives you 60% of your max health. You can use the other one that gives you more magicka back. So nothing too special or fancy there. However, the next skill, Crystallized Slab, very fancy. One of my favorites, almost a 32,000 point damage shield with 3 shield slabs here that will reflect up to 3 projectiles, sending back an Icy Bolt and restoring magicka. If the Icy Bolt crits, you will also proc Calurion's Legacy. Like right there, it crit the enemy, it proc Calurion's Legacy, the fire of Calurion's Legacy went and sought out the enemy, he's dead. This skill is great. This combined with Dampen Magic is going to give you all the instant shielding you need. Combined with some of the healing, your survivability is extraordinary on this build. Okay, so moving on. I want to talk about Structured Entropy. This skill is great now. For the B slot on my staff bar, I messed with swapping this one out for the Swarm, the Warden ability Swarm, or the Destruction Staff ability Destructive Reach. The damage output's about the same on all of them pretty much, but Structured Entropy is going to give you back almost 1,000 healing every 2 seconds. And you could load up more than one enemy, and you see the blue glow on my skin. That's healing hitting me from all these different sources. So I like how you can just cast this out a few times to a few enemies and get that additional healing over time. Alright, next skill, Blockade of Storms. Everybody knows what that is. I do use this in PvP. It's great for sitting large areas off balance, giving everybody minor vulnerability. So definitely a great skill to have and use. Next skill, though, is the most important. Crushing Shock, an imperative skill to this build. Flame, frost, and shock damage, there's your triple threat. And with a charged staff, the status effects associated with those elements are going to constantly apply. Burning, minor maim from chilled, and minor vulnerability from shock. And you're also going to proc your Calurion's Legacy with a higher likeliness because there's 4 deliveries of hits and Icy Conjurer from the shock. There's Icy Conjurer, and there's Calurion's Legacy. So that skill right there, in combination with the heavy attack or casted at the end of a heavy attack, is great. Okay, last skill, the Sword and Board Ultimate Healing Thicket. Almost 7,000 health instantly, and then over 2,200 health every second for you and all allies for 6 seconds, and then an additional 4 seconds after leaving the circle expiring. That's a lot of healing. That combined with Arctic Blast, Nature's Embrace, and Structured Entropy, you've just got so many different sources of healing. That combined with your physical and spell resistance, your sword and board passives, your wards, the survivability and tankiness of this build is great. And then on the staff bar, the offensive threat that you can be is also great. Okay, so now let's look at the champion points here. Some of these will be how you see fit, depending on your playstyle, and some of these will be a little more imperative to stick to. On this tree, magic recovery is very important, and tenacity. You're going to be doing those heavy attacks, so you want to get more back as a result of those heavy attacks with that lightning staff. All right, next tree, pretty much tumbling and shadow wards what you want. Roll dodge reduction and block cost reduction. We're sword and board, so that block cost reduction goes a long way. On this tree, elemental expert, obviously, and spell erosion. Remember, we're getting even more spell erosion from Icy Conjurers, like 1435. As a 4-piece set there, the fourth trait. Staff expert on this tree, obviously, we're doing a lot of light and heavy attacks, mostly heavy. That's going to be great to have the butcher passive, allowing you to deal even more damage with light and heavy attacks against enemies under 25% health. Remember that when you distribute your champion points, you want to go just 1 click above the next whole number. Everything else is wasted as a decimal. Exploiter, I can't talk about this one more. The enemies are constantly going to be off balance, so you want to make sure you unlock that tree. Do it with Thaumaturge, because most of what we're doing is damage over time. That Exploiter passive is overpowered with this build because your enemies are almost virtually always off balance. Okay, defensive trees now. Crit resistance, physical and spell resistance obviously is going to be important to do, but the number one thing you want to get is resilient. When you take critical damage, you get a little more healing. Just another source. The next one, light armor, so let's buff that up. Damage over time. I didn't put any in Hardy or Elemental Defender, but Critical Leech, you want to unlock this one. So when you deal direct critical damage, you're going to be healing there. So another little source of healing. Everything adds up. These you can distribute how you see fit. Bastion for damage shield potency. Quick recovery for more healing. So this is kind of however you want to do it here, but that pretty much wraps up the champion points. I'll show one more final display of kind of how these skills kind of come together. I'm going to go to my test dummy here. So just to show more proc rates and more effects, there's a heavy attack. You saw how it procced Valken Scoria. I followed it up with a crushing shock. It procced Calurions. I mean, he's getting hit by the Wraith. Valken Scoria again. When you do a heavy attack, that's pretty much a crushing shock. That's almost always going to happen. The Wraith comes out, Calurion's Legacy procs, and then Valken Scoria delivers. And I'm not layering down the fields, the AoEs and whatnot. I'm just trying to keep things a little bit simpler as far as visibly for you guys to see. With just heavy attacks and crushing shock, what you can do as far and how bursty that is. As far as your single target damage. And remember, with a lightning staff, the passive you get, you deal more damage with all your AoEs. So let's kind of do a full thing here. There's the Northern Storm ultimate, Blockade, Winter's Revenge, heavy attacks. You're seeing that Valken Scoria is coming. The Wraith is still damaging him. Let's pull some entropy. There's the Wraith again. Heavy attack. I mean, it's just there's a lot of big numbers that come in with a lot of sudden burst. In addition to some good ticks of damage over time, good AoE areas to kind of play and fight in. Anyway, that's pretty much the build. I will say this, I played around with a lot of variations to this triple element build, including using Zon, the monster set with that flame beam, Auroran's Thunder with that lightning AoE cone, Winterborn. There's actually, even Grothar, there's an AoE version where you could just kind of use Winterborn, Grothar, and Aurorans, and with a lightning staff, and your AoE damage is just unparalleled. Everything, the whole area around you is constantly just, with all three of those elements, just constantly zapping, burning, and freezing. Very visually cool, but also effective. So check out some of those variations, see which ones you like best. I liked this one best for PvP. It seemed to be the most effective. But feel free to tweak this build. Please copy and share. And as always, get out there and have fun. If you're not getting teabagged, you're not doing a good job. So keep that in mind. But I've got some other builds that I've shared in the past. I've got some more coming up. Check out my other builds. And as always, guys, thanks again. Dark Energy, signing out.